Hello everybody, this is Kate at the Library of Whispers, and today I'm going to read to you chapter 5 of my ghost story mystery. This is the revised version. This chapter is titled Beatrice Scullion. Rachel placed the folder next to her cup of coffee on the kitchen table. It was bound with a dirty piece of reddish ribbon. Deep in thought, she absent-mindedly twisted one of the ends of ribbon with her fingers while studying the flyer she'd found in the Reverend Charles's history book. I offered her a freshly opened packet of chocolate digestives and beckoned her to take one. She took a biscuit, snapped it in two, and put both pieces down on the table without eating either. "Beatrice Scullion," she said slowly. "The lady who lived here before us," I said. Rachel nodded and pointed to the handwritten notes on the back of the flyer. "Yeah, same name that appears here." "So she was the niece of the Pike's house steward, Sylvester Scullion? The man who inherited Hallows House?" "The very same," answered Rachel. After a pause, she pointed to Beatrice's folder of papers. "I wonder how long this stuff has been hidden inside the clock." "From the looks of it, quite a while," I answered, running my finger over the dusty folder. Rachel lifted one of the biscuit halves to her mouth, then paused before it reached her lips. On second thoughts, she placed the uneaten biscuit back down on the table and began untying the ribbon and removing it from the folder. "Right, let's get this thing opened. What could be so important that Beatrice had to hide it away in an old clock?" she said. As she opened the folder, a number of sheets of paper fell to the floor, so I reached down and picked them up. "Old receipts," I said, glancing at them and passing the first one to Rachel. "This is dated June 1963 and is for a blue Wilton rug, 28 litres of white paint, and a wooden dog kennel." "That seems like a lot of paint," said Rachel. "I suppose it depends on what you want to use it for," I smiled. Rachel picked up another piece of paper from the folder. "And this looks like an old payslip," she said, "from Myrtleton and Monk's Ferry Corporation, dated May 1940. I took it from her. "Looks like Beatrice worked for the town hall. I wonder what she did." Rachel shrugged. "But why keep it? You'd be surprised the kinds of things people keep. I think I still have my first payslip." "Yeah, but you didn't keep it locked away in an old clock. Or did you?" She grinned. "I didn't, but it has given me an idea," I laughed. We spent the next half an hour thumbing through some of the documents. There were more old receipts for everyday items, several invoices, old gas and electricity bills, more payslips and old copies of TV licenses. Rachel sighed and closed the folder. "This is all standard household stuff. I wouldn't call any of it confidential," she said. I agreed. Yes, it's disappointing, although I'm not sure what we were expecting. "Well, something more interesting than this," she said, standing up. She took a last gulp of her coffee and popped a piece of biscuit into her mouth. "You know, I think Doreen's migraine is starting to rub off on me. I'm going to head to bed. I'll look at the rest of this tomorrow. It doesn't look very inspiring anyway." I nodded, and she passed me her empty mug. It was some time after 3 in the morning when I heard a light tapping on my bedroom door, followed by, Mum, are you awake?" "I am now," I groaned. "Are you okay, Rach?" "No, I've had that weird dream again and the light is back," she said. "Light?" I asked drowsily. "The one coming from the old hall. Will you come and look?" she asked. I sighed and drew back my warm bed quilt. It was chilly in the bedroom, so I put on my slippers and dressing gown. Rachel had already gone back to her own room, so I walked across the landing to her open door. "Look," she said as he entered the room. "It's still there." She was sitting in her window seat with her nose pressed against the pane. I approached and looked out, but all I could see in the black night was the shadowy outline of the old manor house and the tops of tall trees. "Can you see it?" she pleaded. "Not really, Rach," I answered. "Wait till your eyes get used to the dark," she said. "You'll see it then." I pressed my nose against the window pane and squinted. Still nothing. I pulled away from the window and turned to her. "Sorry, love. All I see is darkness," I said. She seemed upset. "Then why can I see it? At least I could before." "I don't know. Maybe it's the reflection of a streetlight or a passing car," I reasoned. "There are no streetlights or cars back there, Mum," she said, turning to face me. "That's not helpful." "I don't know then," I said, trying to be gentle. I took her hand in mine. "Oh, you're freezing." She jerked her hand away and went to sit on her bed. "Tell me about the dream," I said, joining her. She remained silent for a moment, twisting a loose strand of hair in her fingers, and then she began. "I was on the other side of our garden wall again, but this time it was night. The red gate was open, like it was the last time, and I walked through it. There was snow on the ground, but I didn't have anything on my feet. It was weird though, because I couldn't feel the cold. The fruit trees were bare and everything looked lifeless. I carried on walking. I could hear the crunching of the snow as I took each step. Then there was the hoot of an owl in the distance, and I looked up and saw a stone fountain ahead of me. It had a peacock on the top, and all the water in it was frozen." She stopped and looked at me a little scared. "Mum, when I looked down, the reflection in the ice wasn't me. It was Elizabeth Pike." "Oh, love," I said, "there's obviously an explanation to all of this. The fountain and the painting of Elizabeth Pike, it's all been on your mind after yesterday's visit to the library. That's all." "I want to believe that, and you're probably right," she said, "but the light is real, even if the dream is all in my head." Then pausing for a second, she added, "But it's creepy that I look so much like her, isn't it?" "I think it's just a strange coincidence, that's all," I answered. "Don't worry about it. Look, you get back into bed and try to get some more sleep. You look exhausted." She sighed, nodded, and climbed back under her covers. I went back to my room, but it took me a long time to get back to sleep. I was beginning to regret opening the door to the stranger on that rainy Halloween night. Sunday, the 4th of November. It was still dark outside, even though my phone told me it was 6:30 a.m. I stood in the kitchen with an apron over my dressing gown. I had my sleeves rolled up and I was looking down at a large brown and pink checked bowl full of flour and pieces of butter. I heard Rachel coming down the stairs and I looked over to witness a very groggy and dishevelled looking daughter throw herself on the comfy chair near the fire. She drew her legs up onto the chair and hugged her knees, then looked up at me and gave a wide yawn. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm making pastry," I answered. "Why?" she said, yawning again and rubbing her eyes. "At this time in the morning?" "Well, I woke up early and I remembered I have to make a Bakewell Tart," I said. She rubbed her eyes again. "What?" she said. "Why?" I laughed. "I forgot to tell you, last night with all the drama about the clock and the secret papers, but I bumped into our neighbour and invited him around for tea and cake. And you have to make a Bakewell tart, she said. Well, yes, it's what he asked for, I answered. He specifically asked for a Bakewell tart, she said. He did, I answered again, brushing flour off my fingers. And you don't think that's weird, she said, hauling herself up off the comfy chair. I'm starting to think that weird is our new normal, I said, smiling. Ain't that the truth, she said, sighing. She came up behind me and put her hand on my shoulder. I'm going up to get a shower. What time is Bakewell Tart Man coming around, she asked. I laughed. Not till this afternoon. He said about 3. I turned and looked at her. Anyway, how are you feeling this morning? Rough, she said, as she slowly wandered off. Rachel stayed upstairs for the rest of the morning. I noticed that she'd taken her shopping bag with the stranger's envelope of documents in it, plus Beatrice Scullion's pack of confidential papers. After I'd had my shower and dressed, I popped my head through her door to see if she wanted a hot drink. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed, her hair piled up in an untidy bun, with the various papers and documents strewn around her. Some of them were in separate piles on the floor, and she appeared to be writing something in a large notebook. Putting her pen down, she looked up at me. Yes, a cup of tea, please, she said, answering my question. And a bit of toast, she added. It's nearly lunchtime, I said. I'm saving myself for the Bakewell tart later, she said, grinning. Okay, tea and toast coming up, madam, I said, making a little mock curtsy. She mouthed a "Thanks, Mum" at me and carried on writing. When I was halfway down the stairs, she suddenly shouted out, Mum, come here, look at this. I walked back into her bedroom. She was holding up a small brass key in one hand and pointing at it with the other. This was taped to the back of a photograph, she said. It's from Beatrice Scullion's documents. A photograph, I said. I didn't know there were any photographs in the folder. Yeah, I found a few, all black and white, and a couple of postcards. They were stuffed together in a separate envelope in the middle of Beatrice's piles of boring receipts and household bills. Another key, though? That's curious, I said, as Rachel tossed it over to me. I took my reading glasses out of my cardigan pocket and closely examined it. Ooh, this one has the number 1 engraved on it, and the same E and J Pike inscription as the stranger's key. Rachel beckoned for me to pass the key back to her. Yeah, it does, she said. I wonder if they're connected in some way. What number was on the other key? I said. 3, said Rachel. So, there's potentially more to be found, I said. There's definitely more to be found, said Rachel. She reached across her bed, picked up an old photograph and handed it to me. It was attached to the back of this. The photo had a sepia-coloured tint and was slightly dog-eared on one corner. It showed a large detached Victorian building with an indecipherable sign over the front door. In front of the building stood an old stagecoach and 2 white horses. A man in a flat cap and rolled-up shirt sleeves was standing next to one of the horses and holding on to its bridle. He stared stiffly and unsmilingly into the camera. Look on the back, she instructed. I turned the photograph over and read out a handwritten inscription. The 5 Keys Hotel, King Street, Monk's Ferry. Well, there's your number of keys, I said. She nodded. Yes, and Mum, do you remember that Elizabeth Pike was holding a set of 5 brass keys in the library's painting? You said it was 5, but I found it difficult to tell, I said. I know, but I think this key and the stranger's key are part of that set, and there must be a connection with this place, the 5 Keys Hotel. Well, I guess that's possible, I said, turning the photograph over and looking again at the building in the image. King Street, I said. That's the road on the way out of Monk's Ferry towards the moors. I don't remember any buildings that look like that over there, though. Do you? No, said Rachel. But I'll add it to my list of things to check when I get back to the library tomorrow. OK, and perhaps we should show this to our neighbour? Perhaps he'll know something about the Five Keys Hotel. Do you think it's wise to tell him about all this stuff? She said, pointing to the old documents strewn about her bed and floor. I'm not sure, I said. Let's see what he's like first. Chapter 6. Bakewell Tart. Later that day, we were back down in the kitchen, waiting for the arrival of our visitor. I was on my hands and knees, poking about at the back of a cupboard, trying in vain to retrieve my poshest plates. Irritatingly, it's where I'd shoved them only a couple of days ago, not realising we'd need them so soon. Rachel sat at the table, leafing through her stack of documents and papers. She tapped her pen rhythmically against her empty mug of tea. It made an irritating ping, ping, ping sound. Rach, will you stop doing that? It's annoying, I said. He's late, she murmured, dropping her pen noisily on the table and flipping open her mobile phone to check the time. Only by about 10 minutes, I said. Why does he need the posh plate? She asked. Because he's a guest, I said. I've never liked them, she said, all those flowers and frilly edges. You can't even put them in the dishwasher. I bit my lip. She was starting to get on my nerves. They're Royal Dalton, Rachel. They've been passed down in the family. You know that. And when do you ever fill the dishwasher? All the time, she exclaimed in indignation. We looked at each other to see who was going to get the door. It was clear that it wasn't going to be Rachel. He's your guest, she said, and took a sip of her tea. I frowned, stood up, wiped off the dust from my jeans, and headed to the front door. I showed our guest into the kitchen. This is my daughter Rachel, I said. Rachel smiled and began setting the table with the posh plates. She'd obviously managed to recover them for me while I was answering the door. You look very familiar, he said to her. Have we met before? Rachel shook her head. I don't think so, she answered. I could have sworn, he began. A trick of the light, perhaps? Rachel looked uneasily at me. His words sounded strangely familiar to both of us. Suddenly, he was distracted by the contents of the table and exclaimed, Oh, you have Bakewell Tart. It's my favourite. How did you know? You requested it yesterday when we met, I said, confused. When I invited you round? Ah, he said, I'll have to take your word for it. But if I did say it, and I obviously did, otherwise how would you know, then thank you. It looks delicious. He sat himself down at the table and began to gaze around the room. You know, I haven't been in this kitchen since Miss Scullion was taken into Riverside. That's the local care home, you know. Must have been 2 and something years ago now. Then you knew Beatrice Scullion, I asked. Oh, yes, very well, he answered. For many, many years. I knew her as Bea, though. A lovely lady. Lived here all her life, you know. Ah, said Rachel, suddenly invigorated. Then I have so much to ask you. I'm doing some research into the house and the old manor at the back and all the people connected with it and... Rach, I cut in sharply, maybe we should have some tea and proper introductions first before all the questions. The old man smiled. Yes, tea and tart first, questions later. Oh, and you can call me Bert. My full name is Herbert Fogg, but only my mother called me Herbert. Another Fogg, I thought, reading Rachel's expression. I could tell she was thinking the same. Bert was on his second helping of Bakewell Tart and telling us all about his vast collection of stamps. He'd asked me whether his piece of tart could be warmed and whether we had any ice cream. We didn't, so we ate both slices cold and without the benefit of a sweet topping, which didn't seem to blunt his enjoyment. He wiped the crumbs from around his mouth with a piece of kitchen roll handed to him by Rachel, patted his full stomach and took a sip of tea. "My brother told me he bumped into you the other day," he began. "Said you were wandering around the graveyard." "Yes, we were," I answered. "Your brother is Stanley Fogg?" "Younger brother, yes," said Bert. "Lives at Catlow Cottages. I pop in, especially since Doris died." "Doris? I'm assuming that was his wife's name," I asked. "He was putting flowers on her grave." Bert nodded. "Actually, we weren't just wandering around," said Rachel. "We were trying to find a particular grave." "I know," said Bert. "Stan said you were looking at the Pike family's plot. I spoke to him last night." I nodded. "Yes, we were trying to find out more about the Pike brothers. We learned that they had built our house. And mine too, of course," Bert interrupted. "It was called Hallows House back then, before it was divided by Bee's Uncle Sylvester." You might be able to answer a few questions we have about that," said Rachel. "I can try," said Bert. Your brother told Mum that Hallows House was sold in 1920, but we found a scrap of paper in the library which said that it was inherited by Sylvester Scullion." "Oh, no, it wasn't sold," Bert said. "Stan always gets things wrong. Bee's Uncle Sylvester was left it by Joseph Pike. Bee was born here." He tapped the kitchen table emphatically to show us that he meant right here. "Do you mean in this kitchen?" said Rachel. "Yes, in this very kitchen," he said. Rachel and I shared a look of astonishment. Then she proceeded to jot down notes in the writing pad she had balanced on her knee. "I have a question, Mr. Fogg," I said. "Please call me Bert," he said. Bert, I've been wondering why our houses are numbered the way they are. Why ours is number 9 and yours is number 7, when the only other 3 houses, further on up the road, have names." Bert scratched his head. "I don't have an answer for you," he said. "It's not something I've ever thought about before." "Oh," I said, "okay." I was a little dismayed. Mrs. Locke couldn't answer that question either, although, as Rachel would have said, that wouldn't be a surprise. Rachel looked up from her notes. "So, Mr. Bert, when was Beatrice B. born, and who were her parents? Oh, and do you have a wine cellar and a fountain in your back garden? And why was Sylvester Scullion left such a valuable house? Wasn't he just the Pikes' house steward?" "So many questions," said Bert, raising his arms above his head in mock confusion. "And so many papers," he continued, looking at Rachel's pile of documents. "We found them," said Rachel. Then she stopped and looked at me. We'd agreed not to say anything about the papers until we knew Bert better. I shrugged my shoulders. It was up to her if she wanted to tell him. She turned back to Bert and continued. "We found some of them in the old clock in the hallway last night. They belonged to Bee." "Did you?" said Bert in surprise. "In the old clock? I wonder what they were doing in there." Rachel shrugged. "No idea," she said. "There are other documents too, as well as these," I began, and then paused and looked uncertainly at Rachel. Were we going too far? Should I tell Bert about our encounter with the stranger the other night? Rachel seemed to sense what I was about to do, and nodded her approval. I cleared my throat and continued. "Mr. Fogg, something very strange happened the other evening. A man, a stranger, knocked on our door and handed us an envelope with old documents and newspaper clippings inside. He said they were from people called the Messrs. Pike," added Rachel, passing the large envelope to Bert. Bert looked startled and carefully took the package from Rachel before putting it down on the table without looking at it. "A stranger, you say?" he said. "What did he look like?" "Oh," I answered, surprised by the question. "Well, he was tall and thin, middle-aged, I would guess. It was difficult to see his features in the dark, but I think he wore round-rimmed glasses and he had a moustache. He also had a faint regional accent. I couldn't work it out at the time, but now I think about it, it could have been Irish." "And he was wearing a top hat," Rachel added, "and weird old-fashioned clothes, and he also had a terrible cough. We thought maybe he was dressed up for Halloween. He's the whole reason we've been trying to find out about the Pike family, and—" Before she could finish her sentence, Bert interrupted. "Then it was All Hallows Eve?" Yes," Rachel answered. "Is that relevant?" Bert didn't speak. Instead, he looked down, sighed, and shook his head. "Mr. Fogg," I asked, "is there something we should know? You look concerned." He still didn't answer. He looked at Rachel's stack of papers and said, "Are there any old photos in that pile of B's documents, young lady?" "Yes," she said, handing a couple to him. "There are pictures of old buildings and people, but I don't know what or who they are." Bert slowly searched through the collection of photographs, stopping at an old sepia-coloured image of a family group. He took out a pair of reading glasses from his pocket and looked carefully at the photo. Then he placed it on the table and turned it to face us. "Now then," he said, pointing to a small family group. "This is B's mother and father, Alice and Charlie. That's B herself as a child, sitting on her mother's knee, and at the side of B's father is his brother Sylvester, B's uncle." We both peered at the formal family photograph, taken out in the open air in front of a garden wall adorned with climbing roses. To the left of the group, and within the stone wall, was a wooden gate. B's father held a basket full of apples, and B herself held a small apple in her hand. "Is that our garden gate?" exclaimed Rachel, looking at me. I shook my head. "I don't know. I suppose it could be," I said. "It is," said Bert. "The photograph was taken in your back garden." Rachel looked at me open-mouthed. "Charlie and Alice Scullion lived in your house, number 9, and Sylvester lived in my house, number 7, continued Bert. "The Scullions were from Ireland. Charlie was the younger brother, and he came over from Dublin with his pregnant wife and moved in. That was the arrangement for years and years, until Sylvester died in 1941. The year I was born, I might add. And the year my parents moved in. They'd been bombed out from the city, you know, during the Blitz." Rachel took up her pen and began making notes as Bert spoke. "Anyway," he said, pointing to the tall, thin, bespectacled figure of Sylvester Scullion in the photograph, "do you notice any resemblance to your stranger?" I peered at the figure. "Are you saying that the man who came to our door is a relative of the Scullions?" Bert was silent. Rachel turned to me. "No, that's not quite what Bert means, is it, Bert?" "It isn't," he said quietly. "Hold on," I said, "I'm confused." Rachel glanced at Bert and then turned back to me. "Bert's suggesting that this is the stranger, the actual man who came to our door." "What? The man in the photo?" I said. "That's ridiculous. It can't be the same person. You just said he died in 1941. "Yes, of tuberculosis," added Bert, matter-of-factly. "No, that's impossible," I said. "The man I shook hands with the other night was very much alive." Bert sighed, picked up the last crumbs of Bakewell Tart from his plate with his fingers and popped them in his mouth. I was flummoxed and starting to feel uneasy about Bert. "What do you think of this crazy idea?" I said, turning to Rachel. Rachel picked up the photograph from the table and looked again at the figure of Sylvester Scullion. "Mum's right," she said to Bert. "Dead people don't come back to life." We sat in silence for a couple of minutes. The wind was picking up outside, and a few spots of rain began to trickle down the glass pane of the window. I hadn't realised how dark the room had become. As I stood up to turn on a lamp, Bert broke the silence and whispered, "Strange things happen sometimes. Strange things." "What things?" Rachel whispered back. "Do you believe in ghosts?" he said. "Of course she doesn't," I cut in sharply. "Mum, I can speak for myself," she said. "Well, you don't, do you?" I said. Sensing the tension between us, Bert rose from his chair. "I've probably said too much," he said. "Thank you for the Bakewell Tart, Mrs. It was very kind of you to make it, and very nice to meet you both, but I should probably be going." "You can't leave it there," said Rachel, also rising from her chair. "Mr. Fogg, Bert, you need to tell us more." "I think I've said enough," he answered, and began to walk towards the door. "Yes, Mr. Fogg has said enough," I snapped. "Let me see you out, Mr. Fogg." I began ushering him out of the door and into the hallway. Rachel came up behind us. "But, Mum, you know that strange things have been happening to me too," she said. "Bert, why did you ask us if it was the night of All Hallows Eve when the stranger came to our door? What's the connection? Is it because that's the night that Elizabeth Pike was murdered?" "Yes," he said gravely, as he reached the front door. "So you know about her murder?" she asked. "I know some things," he answered. "Then please stay," begged Rachel. "I've been having awful nightmares. I need to find out why." "But you said you don't believe in ghosts," he said. "No, that's what Mum said," she answered. "But even so, there might be another explanation." He hesitated and turned to me. "I'll stay if your mother will allow it." I frowned and crossed my arms. I wasn't happy with all this talk of the supernatural, and I really wanted Bert to go. I turned to Rachel. She looked at me pleadingly. "Can he stay?" she asked. I knew she was desperate for some answers. Any answers. I mulled it over for a moment, and then reluctantly nodded my approval. Bert smiled. "Any chance of another cup of tea first, then?" he said. And that ends chapter 6. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.